You are in administrative enforcement actions, what you need to know, and we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. Okay, let's take a look at our mission. So, the Office of Child Support Services, or OCSS, puts children first by helping both parents provide for the economic and social well-being, health, and the stability of their children. And research has found that receiving child support makes a difference. Children receiving child support exhibit increased self control, have improved social outcomes, and complete school in greater numbers than those not receiving child support. Next slide. We'll begin with a few definitions that we'll be using throughout the training. So CP stands for custodial parent, and that's the parent, relative, or guardian who lives with and is the primary caretaker of the child or children. The NCP is the non-custodial parent, and that's the parent who does not live with and is not the primary caretaker of the child. Current support is the amount of money that the NCP is required to pay on an ongoing basis. And this is different from arrears. Arrears is unpaid child support debt, and this is the amount of child support that's past due. DSS is the New York City Department of Social Services, otherwise known as HRA, and CA is cash assistance benefits, sometimes referred to as TANF. Okay, next slide. All right, so here we'll begin with the life cycle of a child support case, and we'll get to those arrows in a second. So the process begins with the opening of a case, followed by parentage being established, and then the child support order is established by the support magistrate in family court. Once the support order is established, we can begin collecting and distributing support, which is then followed by enforcing the order and or modifying it if it becomes necessary. So the 2 points when NCPs are most likely to begin accumulating debt are when the order is established and during the other part, which is modifying and enforcing that order. So later on in the training, we'll begin to give you some tips how to avoid that debt. Okay, next slide. Okay, so our administration, it's important to realize that child support is federally mandated, state supervised, and locally administered. So New York City OCSS has many programs that are not available in other parts of the state or the country. So while child support is required by federal law, each state supervises its own program. So, for example, New York State child support services is available to all residents, regardless of citizenship status. Now, that's not the case in some other states. And similarly, different states have different policies regarding incarceration for non-payment of child support. In New York, incarceration is limited to willful refusal to pay child support. Okay, next slide. This is an important slide, something that we stress later on in the training, the importance of NCP participation. So engagement in the process is critical because participating in the process provides protections from day one. On the other hand, if the NCP doesn't participate, ignores mail, ignores court hearing, child support debt can pile up quickly. So when the NCP participates, either in court or with an agreement, the child support order is aligned with their income. There are protections in place for lower income NCPs. So ideally, the NCP pays on time in full, and it results in better outcomes for both the parents and the children. Let's take a look at those protections. Next slide. So here's what's available for low income NCPs. First, there's something called a poverty order, which is an order at $25 a month or less if the NCP earns below the federal poverty level. And in 2024, that was $15,060 a year. There's also a cap on the amount of arrears owed to DSS, which is $500. There's something called a minimum order, which is an order at $50 a month for NCPs earning at or below the New York State self-support reserve. It's a little bit higher than the federal poverty level. It's $20,331 in 2024. And what's left is the Child Support Standards Act. So child support is set at a fixed percentage of the NCP's income if they're earning above the New York State self-support reserve. Okay, next slide, Izzy. So the best way to avoid child support debt is to prevent it from getting started in the first place. So if the NCP doesn't engage, issues can begin quickly. And there are two ways that happens. Number one, the NCP fails to appear in court and something called a default order is issued. So missing a court hearing may result in the order not being aligned with the NCP's income. The other way debt begins is if the NCP does not return to court when they experience the change in circumstances and the order continues to charge at a higher rate. Okay, next slide. We'll take a look at some of these enforcement actions. So first of all, there are two types. If at any point the NCP fails to meet the monthly support obligation, enforcement actions may begin. The two types are administrative and judicial. So for administrative, one important point is they occur systematically based on the amount of arrears owed. The NCP is notified by mail and they can challenge these actions. The CP does not have to take any action when the NCP misses a payment. It's something that happens automatically in the system. Now, if administrative actions are unsuccessful and court is the only alternative, a violation petition may be filed. And this results in a money judgment, which can have 9% interest. Right? Next slide, please, Izzy. So what are those administrative enforcement actions that OCSS can take? So the first one is income withholding and medical execution. Now, both of these are required by law and they are part of the court order, and it's not because of any arrears. However, enforcement actions that are triggered by arrears include credit reporting. It can include seizing bank accounts, a driver's license suspension, a tax refund intercept. New York City professional licenses can be suspended. Lottery prizes can be intercepted, and a referral to New York State Department of Tax and Finance. And new passports can be denied, although there are challenges and exceptions in each of these cases, and low-income NCPs are excluded from some of those actions. Next slide, please. So if an NCP believes that an enforcement action is occurring erroneously, they have the right to challenge. So some reasons to challenge are OCSS has incorrect information, and this can certainly happen. Examples of incorrect information include a case of missing identity, the wrong person has been identified. There could also be an error in the amount of arrears and or the past support due. It's possible that the order does not exist and it has been terminated. Another reason is that the NCP is exempt from the action by law if their income is low. So a challenge can be submitted to OCSS. The necessary steps are listed in the notice sent to the NCP. There are timeframes to submit these challenges, ranging from 10 to 45 days, depending on the action. OCSS will review the case and determine if the challenge should be upheld and approved in the NCP's favor or denied. The notice is sent to the NCP of OCSS's decision, and a valid challenge will typically be resolved 30 to 90 days from the date the initial notice was sent, which is that OCSS has a new mobile app. It's called the Access HRA Child Support mobile app. So it really does streamline a lot of the processes for child support. So right from your phone, you can now apply for child support. You can submit forms. Payments can be made using a credit card, debit card, PayPal, or Venmo, and there's no fee. Other states do charge a fee. And you can apply for an agreement or a debt reduction. It's also possible to use the app to file one of those challenges by submitting the forms. So this app is available in a variety of languages, and to download it, use that QR code on the screen, or we'll be sending you this presentation when we are done with live links, and you can go ahead and use that website as well. So I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm about to turn this presentation over to Chuck.
Thanks, Eileen. Now we're about to dig into each of these enforcement actions, excuse me, and you're going to see a lot of information on every screen. So I just want to reaffirm what Eileen just said, which is we will be sending you a copy of this presentation because you'll see for each enforcement action, we're going to give a description of the action, the criteria for which selection is made of the NCP, the exemptions from that enforcement action, and how the NCP can respond. So first and foremost, we have the income withholding order, or IWO. And an income withholding order is an automated collection method through the employer where monies are withheld from the NCP's wages to satisfy the child support obligation. It's like garnishment. Income is not limited to an employer, but it can include wages from freelance or temporary work, pensions, military allowances, Social Security, and unemployment insurance. It's the most effective action the agency takes toward achieving its primary goal, keeping children and families out of poverty. About 3/4 of all the funds that are collected by OCSS come from IWO, which if you think about it, makes sense. If the NCP has a job and we're able to garnish that salary, it means that payments are made automatically directly from the employer. The selection criteria is that there's a child support order with current support due or debt, and there are exemptions. Those NCPs in receipt of cash assistance or SSI benefits are exempted from IWO. Also, income execution cannot exceed the limitations placed by the Federal Consumer Credit Protection Act, a federal law that limits the amount of debt that can be collected from an individual's income. So there are occasional times when the amount the court orders to be collected exceeds that which can be collected under the CCPA. It's up to the employer to figure that out and remit the correct amount. It's the NCP's obligation to make sure that payments are being made. While employers must comply with income withholding, NCPs are ultimately responsible for making sure that the right amount is being deducted from the NCP's paycheck. The child support account should be checked to make sure payments are being received and that there aren't any other issues. For example, if an NCP has a full-time job and a part-time job, and the full-time job pays the complete amount of the IWO, then there shouldn't be any money withheld from the part-time job. So it does require keeping an eye on things. Next slide. Now, special notes about income withholding. It's the primary method for child support collection from an NCP's paycheck, and in no way suggests an NCP is or was unwilling to support their children. It's started automatically. Regular payments by income withholding can protect NCPs from certain other administrative enforcement actions, and we'll name those as we go along. As I said earlier, the employer is required to comply with an income withholding order and cannot charge a fee, terminate the employee, or discriminate against the employee in any way because of child support deductions. The IWO amount is the total amount of money the NCP's employer must withhold from their paycheck every frequency period. It includes the court-ordered amount of child support and possibly an additional amount that we call an add amount when that's applicable. And the add amount is designed to reduce the arrears and or retroactive support. We'll talk about the add amount in more detail in a moment. Next slide. Now, the add amount means that current payments of 50% of the amount of the obligation can be added to the payment if there are arrears or if there are retroactive amounts due. For orders with a current payment obligation, it's 50%. If the case is an arrears only case, that's a little complicated, then it's 150% of the most recent obligation amount. The selection criteria, again, is anyone who has child support payments that are past due will have an add amount added. Let's look at a quick example. If the IWO amount is $100 every 2 weeks, but there are arrears, then the add amount will be 50% of $100 or $50. So in each pay period, the IWO withholding will not be $100, it will be $150. So, and that will continue until such time as the arrears are reduced to zero, and then the add amount will go away. There's an exemption for add amount if the income falls below the New York State self-support reserve, which, as we saw, was just a little over $20,000. If the add amount is causing difficulty for the NCP can request a hardship review of the add amount by contacting OCSS customer service in the Manhattan Customer Service Center or through the mobile app that Eileen just mentioned. This may eliminate or reduce the add amount. Next slide. Okay, now, as I said, income withholding is automatic and is part of every child support order. So too is what we call medical execution, or MEDEX. Child support orders always include a provision for insurance for the child. And that can be either ordering that the child be added to the NCP's medical insurance. There are times when the court will look, and if both parents have medical insurance, perhaps the custodial parent's medical insurance is better, in which case the court can order that the child be on the custodial parent's account. So it's part of every order. The court determines who pays it. If neither party has medical insurance, then the order can be made that the custodial parent apply for one of the public programs like Child Health Plus. There is no exemption for MEDEX. It's a part of every order and is automatic. That is addressed by the support magistrate. how you can respond. It's possible that the court mistakenly believes the NCP has medical insurance, whereas in fact, the NCP has lost that benefit, or there's a mistake in terms of the employer. So that can be a challenge based on mistake of fact. That's the only option for medical insurance. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, reporting to credit agencies. This is the first of the administrative actions that happen and are triggered when an NCP falls behind in our database. This happens, we track everybody's payments and past due automatically. And so administrative enforcement actions start automatically when a certain milestone is reached. It's not prejudicial. We don't single out some NCPs for enforcement actions. If the NCP becomes eligible for enforcement, we do it automatically. And in the case of credit agency reporting, when past due child support is equal to $1,000 or 2 times the current monthly obligation, whichever comes first. So that means if the obligation is only $100 a month, and the NCP is 2 months behind, only $200, credit reporting will take place. And that means that we report the credit problem to the major consumer credit reporting agencies, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. As you can imagine, this action can negatively impact important aspects of an individual's life, delay and prevent certain events, such as making it more difficult or more costly to get a credit card, mortgage, or any other type of loan, and or securing approval for an apartment. An NCP, as I said, is selected when the past due amount is just 2 months behind. And the only way to respond is to pay the debt in full, or reduce the debt so it falls below the level, or submit a challenge indicating why the action should not be taken. And again, it's important to stress that we notify NCPs of all pending enforcement actions. We don't just report you to the credit agency. We don't just seize your, take away your driver license. We notify you ahead of time. There is one enforcement action where we don't notify you ahead of time, and I'll talk about that and the reason why that's the case in a moment. But as Eileen pointed out earlier, there's due process involved in administrative enforcement, which means that the NCP has a right to be notified of the pending enforcement action in all but one case. And similarly, the NCP has a right to challenge. Maybe we got the wrong person. If you have a very common name like John Thompson, it's possible that we could be running an enforcement action against an individual who's not the non-custodial parent in the case. It has happened and it could happen. So reporting to credit agencies takes place when the NCP is 2 months behind. Next slide. Now, seizing liquid assets. This is known as property execution, or PEX. And the name doesn't really make sense, because property execution, it sounds like we're going to go out and shoot your house or smash a hole in your boat. Whereas actually, property execution is seizing delinquent, first freezing and then seizing delinquent bank accounts and other liquid financial assets. And the NCP is selected for this enforcement action when past due child support is equal to or greater than 2 times the monthly current support obligation amount and at least $300. But there are exemptions. If the NCP is currently paying by income withholding, so there's an IWO in place, even if it's less than, even though some debt is piling up, and the NCP has less than $3,000 in the bank, then they can be exempt from property execution. The way that an NCP can respond is by paying the debt in full or submitting a mistake of fact form indicating why the action should not be taken, including if the case meets an exemption. And just to expand on that a little bit, in addition to bank accounts, we can also seize certificates of deposit, stock brokerage accounts, even the contents of a safety box. So there are a lot of ways that we can seize your assets. Now, I mentioned earlier that there was one enforcement action where we don't notify the NCP before we start it, and that is property execution. And I think the reason for that should be pretty obvious. If we notify the NCP, hey, we're going to freeze your bank account, the NCP might take the money out of the account, store it in the mattress instead of leaving it in the bag. So first we send a restraining notice to the bank or the brokerage agency, whatever it is, saying, please freeze the assets of NCPX. Then we notify NCPX that the account has been frozen and inform them of the mechanism for making a challenge. So this is the one exception where notice does not come until the action has been initiated. So as I used to say jokingly, first we freeze and then we seize. So property execution is a very powerful tool, obviously, can make the life difficult for the NCP and is something to be taken seriously. It and credit reporting are the two enforcement actions that start when the NCP is just 2 months behind. Other enforcement actions take longer to get started. Next slide, Izzy. Okay, now a very common form of enforcement action is the suspension of a driver license. And what that means is we request New York State Department of Motor Vehicles to suspend the NCP's driver license. The selection criteria is when past due child support is equal to or greater than 4 times the monthly support obligation amount. So you got to be 4 months behind before we will suspend your driver license. Exemptions include if the NCP is making payments via income withholding, receiving cash assistance or SSI, or has an income that falls below the New York State self-support reserve. Now, how the NCP can respond, they can pay the debt in full, which is true with every enforcement action, submit a challenge indicating why the action should not be taken, including if the case meets an exemption, or the NCP can enter into a satisfactory payment agreement. And the satisfactory payment agreement is an agreement to pay the amount due plus an add amount to cover arrears. Now, an NCP should not just say, oh, great, I'll enter a satisfactory payment agreement. I don't know if I can make the payments, but I'll say that I can and give it a shot. Not a good idea. And the reason for this is if you default on a satisfactory payment agreement, then the case will become one where it gets reported to the court through a confession of judgment, and that triggers a 9% interest charge for a satisfactory payment agreement that is not held up to. OCSS will first reach out to discuss why the payments were missed. I did see, and I'm not going to answer the question directly, but with regard to other states, there are states where we have reciprocity so that some states will suspend a driver license at our request if the NCP has a driver license from that state. Other states won't. And I don't have a complete list of those, so we won't get into that this morning. Next slide. It's important to some special notes about driver license suspension. If the suspension takes place, an NCP can request a restricted driver license from the NCP that will allow them to drive just to and from the workplace. So that's Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, from your residence to the parking lot in your workplace, and then from the parking lot back home, a restricted driver license. That does not apply to someone who drives for a living. So you can't get a restricted driver license to drive for Uber or Grubhub or something. It's only to commute to and from work. If the NCP challenges the suspension and OCSS denies that challenge, an objection can be filed in family court, and a judge will determine whether or not the suspension should remain or be removed. And as I noted earlier, if the NCP defaults on a payment agreement, it becomes increasingly difficult to get back their driver license. Plus, the amount that was subject to the payment agreement will become court-ordered judgment and start accruing 9% interest. Next slide. Now, we can also intercept state and federal tax refunds so that tax refunds from New York State or the federal government get sent directly to OCSS to pay past due tax support. This is technically called a tax refund offset. The selection criteria differs a little bit. For New York State taxes, it's 2 months of child support past due, and the debt must be at least $50 or more. For intercepting the federal refund, it has to be 150 or more if the debt is owed to DSS, and 500 or more if the debt is owed to the custodial parent. There are no exemptions. How you can respond, pay the debt in full, and or submit a mistake of fact form indicating why the action should not be taken. And we send out notices in late fall to NCPs that are likely to have this happen to them early in the following year when they file their tax return. So long around November, the NCP will get a notice saying, hey, you're in arrears. We are aware of that. And if you don't catch up and pay the debt in full, we're going to withhold, we're going to intercept your tax refund and apply it against the debt that you owe. Next slide. Now, we can deny New York City business and professional licenses. And there are loads of these. Now, we're not talking about attorneys' licenses, doctors' licenses. Those can only be suspended by the state, and those only happen by a judge in family court when we take a judicial enforcement action. but the administrative enforcement actions can apply to all kinds of New York City professional licenses, taxi driver licenses. The Department of Buildings licenses all kinds of people, elevator inspectors, other kinds of inspectors. And if you are behind in your child support payment, your license will either be denied, it won't be renewed, or a temporary short-term 6-month license will be granted. And this exemption takes place, this enforcement takes place when past due child support is equal to or greater than 4 times the amount of the current obligation amount. Exemptions include when paying by IWO, receiving cash assistance or SSI, or has an income that falls below that $20,000 New York self-support reserve. How the NCP can respond: pay the debt in full, submit a challenge that shows your income falls below the SSR, or request a payment arrangement, either at the customer service center or by using the mobile app. Okay, next slide. Lottery winnings. New York State lottery winnings can be intercepted. This is a good reason to play Powerball. But if you play the New York State lottery and if you have past due child support equal to or greater than $50 and the lottery winnings are at least $600, we can intercept the lottery winnings. There are no exemptions, and the only way to respond is to file a challenge showing a mistake of fact. Izzy likes to tell a story, true story. We had an NCP years ago who had a winning lottery ticket, but he had a lot of child support debt. So he said to his friend, hey, I got this lottery ticket, but I can't cash it in myself. But I'll split it with you if you cash it in for me. And his friend said, sure, I'll do that. Guess what? Turns out the friend also had overdue child support, and the lottery winnings ended up getting seized and credited to the friend's account, not to the NCP who actually got the winning lottery ticket. So you got to be in it to win it, but you got to make sure you don't owe child support debt. Next slide. Referral to the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance. This is a heavy-duty enforcement action. Taxation and Finance can seize assets such as cars, boats, even businesses. And cases are referred when past due child support is equal to or greater than 4 times the current support obligation amount. There are exemptions, including when paying by income withholding, receiving cash assistance, SSI, Medicaid, or SNAP, or if the NCP is currently in the PEX process. We do PEX first and referral to DTF, Department of Taxation and Finance, second, because it really wouldn't be fair to have somebody face both of these at the same time. The NCP can respond by paying the debt in full or submitting a challenge within 45 days of receiving the notice. Okay, next slide. Denying passports. We do not take away your passport, but we can prevent you from getting a passport or from renewing a passport. And we do this by reporting child support debt to the Federal Department of State, which is the agency that grants passports. Both issuing and renewal of passports are affected. And as I said, we can't cancel your passport if you currently have one. We can prevent you from getting one or renewing your passport. And it takes place when past due child support is equal to or greater than $2,500. The only exemption is that emergency circumstances, a death in the family of someone who lives outside the country, a medical procedure that can only be done outside the US, or visiting a terminally ill direct relative in another country are grounds for exemptions where we will permit the NCP to use the passport. How you can respond: pay the debt in full, or request an emergency release for one of the exemption reasons listed below. Okay, next slide. Okay, I'm going to turn the presentation back to Eileen. You've listened to me long enough. Thank you for going through all those enforcement actions.
Thank you, Chuck. Okay, so as we start to wrap up this training, we have a few more slides, which will be giving you some resources. So the first one is on preventing and managing debt. And we understand that debt from any source can have a negative impact on an individual's mental and physical health. But research really suggests that child support debt can also affect other members of the family, the CP and the children. So because of this OCSS has a number of debt reduction programs if the debt is owed to New York City DSS. But we can also provide free or low-cost mediation for debt owed to the custodial parent. And in addition, if the NCP is experiencing a change in circumstances and they can no longer afford child support, we have an agreement process which allows us to help you modify the agreement and work on that prior to going to court. So we'll give you information on how to contact us shortly, but to learn more about these programs, just contact us or to register for an upcoming training that I'll be showing you shortly. There's a couple of key takeaways. And Izzy, if you would give us the next slide, I'll just review that with you. So what do we have here? Having a child support order that's aligned with the NCP's income and the NCP's engagement with child support process is critical for success. And when it works well, it really does work. And that's the case in most cases. Income withholding orders or court-ordered enforcement actions that occur without any arrears being owed. There are safeguards in place to protect the rights of both parents regarding enforcement actions. And New York provides low-income parents with particularly robust protections for both of our parents. And so most of the forms needed to challenge an enforcement action are now available in that HRA mobile access app that you have access to. So some of you out there are our community partners. Let's take a look at that next slide. Here's how you can help. If you are one of those organizations, you are uniquely positioned to identify family members in need of child support, and your members trust the information, the resources, and the guidance you give them. So we have the Child Support Snapshot. It'll allow you to continue to providing trusted guidance about the case. So what it is, it's an online tool that puts the important child support information in your hands for these service providers outside of our organization. You have access to applications, forms, brochures, and videos. And there's also information and next steps without needing to be a child support expert. If you want to sign up for the snapshot or learn more, there's an email on the screen that you can send a request to, and there's also a video that you can watch that there will be a link for as well. Okay, another resource. Next slide. So we understand a lot of our clients and parents are navigating family court without the benefit of an attorney. So there is a resource called Family Legal Care, and it offers free legal information and advice on New York family law and family court procedures. And they are there to help you. So what do they offer? So there is a bilingual helpline that provides legal information by phone, live chat, and email. But there's also legal advice consultations, which would provide an attorney via video conference or phone for family law information only, not representation. There's also tech hubs, and they have lots of information, these navigators to answer your questions. You can also attend a court hearing virtually at these tech hubs. So for appointments, there is a number on the screen that you can call. You can also call them directly at 212-343-1122 or visit their website, familylegalcare.org. And finally, we have been telling you to contact OCSS. Let's take a look at our contact page. So there's a number of ways to contact us. You can contact us by email, and that's the email there, dcse.cse@dfa.state.my.us. We all have that as our email address. And you can request a phone appointment. You can ask questions, or you can let us know your concerns. But we do ask that you provide your name, case number, phone number, and the best time to reach you if you're emailing us. And remember, you can actually set up an appointment through that email. You can walk in at any point. Our office is at 151 West Broadway on the 4th floor. It's between Worth and Thomas Streets. We're there from 8 to 6, Monday through Friday. There is a New York State helpline. The number is 888-208-4485. There's another number for hearing impaired. They are there from 8 to 7, and you can ask your questions there as well. There's some resources. There's 2 websites, our New York City website or the New York State website. It'll give you more information on our programs. And there's a new YouTube channel that has a number of videos that can help you prepare for court, give you any information that your most commonly asked questions are available there, as well as handbooks for the CP and the NCP.
All right. We're coming to the end of today's presentation. So thank you very much.